This is Back Roads of Illinois, server to farmers and ranchers in central Illinois and the Midwest on KSIR in Fort Morgan, Colorado. This is the Markets Club podcast for this week. This week's podcast with Jon Barr from Everag. I and Jon talked about the grains markets for this month, about this growing season, and I will talk about the fertilizer markets with Josh Linville from StoneX Financial Services. I will talk with him on the fertilizer markets because of the war it shows at the Strait of Hormuz in Iran. However, we will talk about this fall application for this post-harvest. This is the Markets Club podcast. This summer is pretty fast and crop is growing quickly like weeds. But what is your thoughts with the fundamentals on the corn markets for this month and the beans markets for next month? We are talking about that with Jon Barr from Everag. Hello, Jon, how are you? Yeah, the brewers are back. But the grains markets are looking through some tricky time.
Yes, sir. Good to be back. For sure, it's been a fast summer, and the markets have been on the move, both down and up. And looking to dive into some of your questions here. And I think we'll cover a lot of good topics today. Obviously, Brewers are back, still back with the best record in baseball and looking good. So.
Jon, what is your position on fundamentals on the corn markets? It seems that we will most likely be $5 for our last couple weeks ago. Could you tell us what's overview of the corn markets?
Yeah, definitely a key time for these corn markets as a good majority of the Midwest last week, 10 days, seeing a lot of tasseling and getting ready for pollination and working through that process right now. Fundamentally, we had the July WASDE report, saw a increase in feed and residual on the old crop balance sheet. In return, lowered that incoming ending stocks for the new crop. So dropped us down to about a 1.79 billion expected ending stocks on new crop. At that point, not a concern. That's a okay number, not $6 corn yet, but one thing that does is really puts pressure on the production side of this 2026 crop. It doesn't take a very big yield cut to really get that number down to a 1.314 as long as demand stays strong. So could be very interesting domestically. I know a lot of guys are still feeling pretty good about the crop. We did get some heat, but had a very wet June. I think most guys will tell you they made it through pollination okay. Like any other year, definitely some problem areas out there, but we'll see if the good outweighs the bad once again. I think as we look at a global side of things, that stocks to use number, growing concern in my opinion. Looks like trading right around a 10.8% stocks to use globally. If we get that down below 10%, things could get a little interesting here. Definitely parts of the world in the EU seeing some very drought-like conditions. Not that they're huge players in the corn game, but it all adds up. If we shave, 3, 4 bushels off of our domestic crop, and I know in your questions here we'll be touching on South America. And I think that is a real concern down there on them heading into a super El Nino, is what they're predicting now. And then you take into the factor that Russia and Ukraine are back going at it stronger than they have the last couple years since the original start in 2022. So fundamentally, right now, okay on the corn side of things, but it's not going to take a lot of stars to align to make that balance sheet very concerning to the tight side. So we'll see how things come out of pollination, and as guys start getting into corn silage here, usually is a slight tell of what's out there, and then for sure by end of September, beginning of October. Harvest will be here before you know it, and we'll start to get some boots on the ground and see what's out there. So yeah, corn's definitely been interesting here as we've gotten through summer here.
What is your position on the corn yield on private crop?
Support underneath both of these grain markets, and there is some very good upside potential post harvest.
Do you see that we can get $12 for the beans markets for next month?
Yeah, that's I think really kind of a gift for guys that were able to store beans and hold out here. Basis has finally came around, especially on the river markets. Barge freight's been a battle all year, but yeah, $12 old crop beans. I think for sure we got to start getting the bins empty there. And new crop, I think if we can make a few $12 cash sales just to hedge ourselves a little bit, but still liking utilizing some put strategies, at least guaranteeing ourselves drawing a line in the sand in case things do go south with China. But definitely understand for guys that can store beans, wanting to wait and see a little bit if there is some more upside. So definitely been utilizing
Mhm.
$12 here across the board.
The cattle markets is higher than expected from last summer for a couple of sessions from last year at this time. What is your position on this cattle markets?
Yeah, the cattle market has definitely been a wild ride as we've are so far into this bull cycle now. We've seen the last basically the month of July here really seen the some of the longs get flushed out here as we've pushed to lows that we haven't seen in quite some time, dating back to almost last November. So definitely seen a correction here the last 2.5 weeks, but I still don't think it's completely over. We're just hitting seasonally a time of year here in July. We're kind of through the major grilling time of year, and summer the gain isn't as well. You don't see as many head of cattle going to slaughter. So I think it's just a little bit of seasonality downtrend that we're in. But the market still scares me. We've rode this bull market so long. Wouldn't be surprised to see a little further correction. Obviously we don't want to see down and out forever. We've had a good couple of days in this cattle market kind of catching itself here. But long term, I do think you continue to see a bit of a slide, just because packer margins continue to decrease. A lot more verbal nervousness from the Packers, especially out west. Growing concern there of how long they're going to be able to stay open and killing at the capacity that they are. The last time we saw a corrected market in a strong way back in 2016, 2017, that is ultimately what collapsed this market was we've seen a large amount of Packers have to close their doors or really back.
Do you have some final thoughts about the beans demand for next month?
Yeah, bean demand, crush again continues to be very strong. I think it'll get very interesting domestically in that crush market if China does actually step to the plate and continue to be strong buyers, because then you're going to see competition that the crush market hasn't really seen for the last year to 18 months, that being China. They've been pretty absent from the export market, so they've been able to buy beans fairly cheap and be able to have really good crush margin for quite some time. So if you see China continue to be aggressive in purchases, I think it gets really interesting of what domestic demand does. They're going to have to really start bidding up for beans, which is good for the producer. We're going to hopefully see if that comes to fruition. Basis values and very good basis opportunity with them having to compete with one another. So demand, it continues, in my opinion. I think with where crush margins are, even though they've came down some, they're still good. So domestic demand, I don't have a big fear of. I think demand is going to ride the coattails, no different than price of China, of how competitive that demand market gets. So that's kind of my thoughts on the demand for beans.
Right. And thanks again.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
This is Jon Barr from Everag on the Markets Club podcast. Next up is Josh Linville from StoneX. The war is unfolding in the Middle East, and demand for fertilizer is pretty tricky again in the Strait of Hormuz. This growing season is heat up for right now with the yield trends on August. Now he's joining us for right now. With us is Josh Linville from StoneX Financial Services. Hey buddy, how are you?
I'm good. I'm not going to complain because I know people got a lot worse off than I do, and all this craziness means a lot of job security. But man, I'm tired. You think about this, the fertilizer market, it's been kind of like an adrenaline drip since February 28th when the whole Iranian war started, and it's been no breaks in between. So you wake up every morning, check the news to see what's going on. You check it all the way through the day. You check it last thing at night, and there's no rest to the middle of it. And you keep thinking it's got to come to an end, but we seem to find a way to drag it out and even make more stuff happen. So it gives us plenty of stuff to talk about.
Do you have some concerns about this application season?
I For the fall, yes and no. If we're looking primarily at the U.S. marketplace, I have a lot of concerns in terms of the phosphate market. And truly, when I look around the world, the phosphate market is being impacted far more than everything we're seeing on nitrogen. Of course, nitrogen's what gets all the attention, but phosphate's getting hurt significantly worse. And if our demand was normal, I would be petrified of what this coming fall is going to look like. However, I think the demand destruction is going to be immense. I think you're going to see a lot of farmers who are going to look at their soil test and say, you know what, I've got really good levels. I can reduce my application rate. I can skip it altogether this fall, winter, spring cycle. Or I'm a fall applicant. I can wait till spring and I can see if this whole thing corrects. So at this point, I'm telling folks I think demand destruction this fall is going to be 50% from normal, not last couple of years, but from normal rates. And I'm saying 50% because I'm not brave enough to say the higher numbers I really think it's going to be. And I think that helps to balance the the demand loss is going to help balance what we've lost on the supply side. So I'm not as concerned there. I will say my biggest concern is that we get to fall or we get close to fall. Maybe there's a change of heart by the farmers and they decide they're going to go ahead and apply last minute and supplies aren't there. Maybe the grain price will continue to go up and suddenly people are like, well, it didn't make sense, but now with corn at whatever price it makes sense, I'm gonna go ahead and start applying it. All that to say, any last minute demand surges, that's what really worries me. Anhydrous for the fall season, I'm not worried about supply there. I think that everything will be all right there. Because most of our anhydrous that we use is produced here in the U.S. We don't have to worry about the global events nearly as much. Now we start looking towards spring. We start looking, a little bit wider. Looking at urea, looking at potash. That involves a lot more of the world. I start to get a little bit more worried about next year, and truly globally, the 2027 crop. That's the one I'm worried about. Everybody was focused on 26, but all these events happened close enough. Most of the product was made and ready to go. 27, we've already done a lot of damage to it. I'm worried about what next year's crop looks like. I'm worried about what next year's fertilizer availability looks like. I'm not going to go run around and say that we're not going to have it. It's not going to be available. All those sorts of things. But I think it's one of those deals we have to have in the back of our mind. Next year may be kind of the nightmare scenario and should have us kind of looking a little bit sooner on some of our purchases than we normally would.
Josh, let's discuss about this situation in the Middle East again for right now with the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. I know it's pretty overwhelming about the fertilizer dilemma. Farmers are facing some challenges over again. We saw it on March, but what would you want to tell farmers about the balance sheet on today's situation?
So again, it's going to depend on which one we're looking at, right? Nitrogen's getting hurt, phosphate's getting hurt worse. But let's start with urea. And the reason it matters to us, not only is it the fact that the Strait of Hormuz represents about a third of the world's urea export market, about half of the U.S. imports needs, the 5 million ton that we typically bring in, come from that region of the world. So we're talking about a very direct supply line that's being impacted. If that remains closed or reduced, we can't count on that like we normally would. One of the biggest things that saved us this spring is that March was one of the single biggest import months for urea into the U.S. And we got those tons just before everything kind of started to fall apart. We're going to be starting from behind. I think the sellers this year are going to be a little more choosy on where they go, who's going to pay the highest price. I don't think there's a guarantee the U.S. gets the tons like we have in the past. I think we're going to have to fight a little bit more to get those, which means we probably need to get our price right versus the world. We tend to spend a lot of the time cheaper than the rest of the world, so I think that's going to need to be a little bit corrected. But on the phosphate, it really comes down to supply availability. You've got China, who is not exporting this year. That's your single biggest supplier, and they're just not. They don't exist. It goes back down to sulfur because of production cost of production availability. Half the world's tradable sulfur comes from the Strait of Hormuz. Russia stopped exporting. That's another 17%. Talk about it. We'll just wait until November. While I don't think that there is going to be a situation where it's like, oh, if you don't talk now, you're not going to get your hands on the product. Oh, you're going to go without. The market always finds a way. I think it's more we need to make sure that we have more conversations from a standpoint that we're watching for opportunity. Not having that conversation means we miss a lot of opportunities. If one pops up, I'm not saying that there is, but if something good pops up and you're not talking, you don't know about it. It comes and goes, and you're none the wiser. The more conversations we're having, A, you get to watch for those opportunities. B, your supplier, your retailer, your co-op, FS, whoever that is, they know more about what to expect from you as far as what you're thinking. Are you going to apply this fall? Are you going to wait till spring? Because there's a lot of stuff that goes on their side, but they've got to make plans. They got to make purchases. They got to get stuff for logistics lined up, manpower. So as I'm looking to it, there's nothing to really say there's going to be anything crazy. Now, anhydrous side, I think everything will be fairly normal. That's still going to be weather dependent. Phosphate demand, I think, will be down. It'll be kind of questionable on what potash will be because it's linked so closely to the phosphate market, just in terms of how farmers apply it. They're not going to pay to apply pay to apply potash in the fall and then pay to apply phosphate in the spring. So high prices of phosphate may hurt potash demand. But for the most part, there's nothing really, or I'm jumping up and down like, oh my gosh, it's just make sure we're having a conversation. That's the best thing we can say. More conversations to have, the better chance of success this market has.
Right. But we are in the fall. Of course, this harvest is almost here. Can we play some off defense or defense?
Yeah, it's hard to believe, right? We're the second half of July. We're in the thick of summer. It seems like fall is a long way away. Winter is an eternity away. But from a logistical standpoint, from an agricultural standpoint, it's right around the corner. We're harvesting in a couple of months. We're 3 months. We are November. And that is just baffling to me that we are that close to it. So again, when you start to think about what it takes to move these products, not only domestically speaking, but globally speaking, it takes weeks. It can sometimes take months plus to move product from point A to point B, and that doesn't even move it inland. So yes, it's very easy to want to ignore it right now and say we got plenty of time. We need to be thinking about it sooner. And again, that's why we say watch those opportunities. Hopefully something will pop up and make sense.
What is your final thoughts about this nitrogen cost for this fall?
It's going to be very hard to lower prices from where we're at today. Now, we never talk in certainty, right? There's no certain thing in this life. As soon as I start to sit there and say this is exactly what will happen, the opposite will happen, and they'll humble me. Yet again, I've made that mistake. So we never say never. But in order to start seeing prices down, you think about the things it would take globally to start having that happen. It's going to take peace with Iran, an end game with Iran. It's going to take neutralizing the Houthi rebel threats. It's going to take peace between Russia and Ukraine. We're going to need a lot of events to finally start going the way of kind of peace and right now it just doesn't look possible. You take all those issues and you combine it with the manufacturers here in North America are very well sold. They are very comfortably sold. That means they have the greatest asset that they have on their side. That's time. They don't need to sell lower immediately because they've got a solid sales book on. They can wait and they can drag their feet and wait to see what happens. And yeah, maybe things are lower today. Maybe they're higher by next week. Let's wait and see. So it would take a tremendous amount of events coming together to help start substantially dropping the price out there. It is not impossible. It's just not likely. And I think we need to go into the fall thinking the prices that we're seeing today are probably what we're going to see, if not a little bit higher, especially as we continue to see grain markets march higher, which I know they're nowhere near where they need to be, but they are higher than what the lows were. And as these global events continue to happen.
Thanks, Josh. I do really appreciate your time for this crazy situation.
Yeah, anytime, bud. Next time, I'm going to try and have some good news for you.
Of course, or a crystal ball.
I'll see what I can do. Mine's a little cloudy.
Thanks again.
No worries.